All right, so we're going to do the quadratic formula. So the first thing we need to know is the quadratic formula. So it is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root. Underneath the square root is b squared minus 4ac. And that whole thing is over 2a. So from the negative b all the way to the end of your square root. Okay, where a, b, and c come from are standard form. So our standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So they're just the coefficients in front. So when we plug into the quadratic formula, there should be no x's or x squareds plugged in. Okay, so we're going to take a look at an example of 2x squared plus 10 equals 4x. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to get it set equal to 0. So in this case, we're going to subtract our 4x over. We have 2x squared minus 4x plus 10 equals 0. Okay, so a couple things. We could reduce. You do not have to. So I'm going to show you that if you didn't notice that it all reduced, what you would do. So then we are going to identify our a, b, and c right now, making sure that our x term is written first, then our x, and then our 10 regardless of the way we started. So a is going to be 2, b is going to be negative 4, and c is going to be 10. Okay, from there we're going to plug into the quadratic formula. So again, it's x equals negative of b, so negative of negative 4, plus minus the square root of our b value, which is negative 4 squared, minus 4 times 2 times our 10, because 2 is a and 10 is c, all over 2 times a, which is 2. Okay, from there, I suggest getting your calculator and typing in what's underneath the square root. Okay, so we're going to have negative 4 squared minus 4 times 2 times 10. And if we type that in, we get a negative 64. Okay, a couple things. If you didn't have your parentheses, I'm just going to go back and erase them. It would not give us the same answer. So it's really important to have our parentheses and make sure that we are squaring the b value and not squaring the number and then multiplying by a negative 1. Okay, so our answer should be negative 64. So I'm just going to rewrite that in our problem underneath the square root. I can also say negative of a negative is positive 4. And then the square root of negative 64 over 2 times 2 is 4. Sorry, I was a little off. And then we're not allowed to have a negative under the square root. We're also not allowed to have the number 64. So we would just go ahead and break it down like normal. So we would pull out a negative 1 since there's a negative sign. And we would say 64. This is Sydney's favorite square root. So the square root of 64 is 8. The square root of negative 1 is our I value. Okay, so we're going to put that back into our problem. So I'm just going to kind of write it over here. So we have x equals 4 plus or minus 8i all over 4. The last thing you want to check for is it all reducible? So in this case, 4, 8, and 4, we can reduce by 4. It's not always going to reduce that nicely, but in this case it does. So 4 divided by 4 is 1, plus minus 8 divided by 4 is 2, I stays, and then over 4 divided by 4 is also 1. We usually don't write that, so I'm going to get rid of it. And then since 1 and 2i are not like terms, that is where we stop. Okay, if we do one more, okay, so that's our answer. 1 plus 2i and 1 minus 2i. So we have 2 complex roots here. All right, so if we look at another one, I'm just going to erase that so I have some room. Okay, so if we do number 2, and we do x squared minus 7x plus 6 equals 0. Okay, so if we go ahead and do this one, it's already set equal to 0, so we can identify our A as 1, our B is -7, and our C value is 6. Okay, then we're going to plug into our formula, so x equals -7 plus minus the square root of -7 squared minus 4 times our A value of 1 times C, all over 2 times 1. So I know negative of -7 is +7, plus minus, I'm going to type in, again, underneath the square root, not including the square root, so I'm going to have parenthesis -7, let me zoom in, -7 in parentheses squared minus 4 times 1 times 6. And we get 25 as our answer. So we're going to replace all of that fun stuff with 25. And then 2 times 1 is just 2. Okay, do we know the square root of 25? Yes, we do. The square root of 25 is in fact 5. Okay, so now we have 7 plus or minus 5 over 2. Since 7 and 5 are like terms, we have to go further and we have to do the plus and the minus. So we have to do 7 plus 5 over 2, which will give us 12 over 2, which gives us 6 is one of our answers. And then 7 minus 5 over 2, which gives us 2 over 2, which is 1 for the other answer. So basically, when we get nice numbers like this, meaning they're rational and they are real, this problem was factorable. Okay, so you didn't actually need to solve it using the quadratic formula, but it is good practice to still do that. Okay, so our answer this time was x equals 6 and 1. Okay, there's the work. All right, that's solving using the quadratic formula.